Wouldn't it be awesome if there was a fully equipped camper that you can just drive around off-road, park it wherever you like, and enjoy a beautiful night in it? I sure thought so, so I made it. The ultimate off-road electric camper. It's a vehicle I've been building from the ground up over the past few years. And throughout that time, it's gone through some pretty major changes. Like just a few months ago, this thing was pretty much a motorcycle. But I'm super proud of what it's become. It's electric powered, it has 4-wheel drive, it has a solar system for help charging the batteries, and it even has a power system for running appliances and the built-in lights. And plus, it's just a cozy cabin on wheels, so what's not to like? But if there is something I think needs an upgrade, it's definitely the power. You see, the motors I currently have installed on the camper, they work, but you can tell they're definitely pushing a bit past their weight limit, as they're pretty sluggish to get this heavy vehicle moving, and the whole time they're on, you can just hear them screaming, which is not the best. So let's change that by upgrading every aspect of power on this, by installing bigger and stronger motors to help get this thing moving, adding on a way larger battery bank to help power it all, then wire it all up with some awesome new electronics, as well as installing new axles and rebuilding the suspension for a stronger, smoother ride. And of course, we'll test it out by taking it off-road for an overnight adventure where we'll drive it around to see how it handles, cook all sorts of delicious foods, test out the exterior against a rainstorm to see if it stays dry inside, and even try our hand at some fishing. All while staying nice and protected inside of a cozy little cabin on wheels. And it all starts in the garage with the current version of the camper. Let's begin. By undoing weeks of work and uninstalling all the motors I put on the front axle, as well as heading to the back and removing the back axle motors as well, turning the vehicle's underside into a blank slate so it's ready to accept on all the new parts. And the first part's gotta be the new motor that's gonna power this vehicle, a beautiful 2,500 watt brushless motor with built-in differential gears. Definitely the biggest motor I've ever used. And when comparing it to the motors I just removed, the new one's at least twice as heavy, twice as big, and more than twice as much power, so I am super excited about this. But you know what would make me more excited? How about 4 of them? For 10,000 watts of motors. Beautiful. But before I can attach all these motors to the vehicle, there is going to be some modifications that need to be done. And it all has to do with the gearing inside of the differential. And I'm always a bit anxious about opening up a new motor because I never really know what it's going to look like inside, but this one's pretty straightforward. It's got some really nice bearings, a nice big puddle of gear oil, and of course, the gears, which is what we're after. Specifically this large one, and there's even gears inside of that. Gears inside of gears. But we finally reached the ones we need to modify. Because if I want the motors to work the way I want, I'm actually going to have to lock down these gears inside the middle. And the easiest way for me to do that is to grab my little flux core welder and melt all the gears together to turn it into just one solid gear. It pretty much bypasses the whole differential part and just turns this into a nice gear system so I can send power directly from the motor to the axle. I can then give it a drink of some gear oil, place on a new gasket around the edge, and tighten down the gear housing on top. And just like that, we got our modified motor. And you might be thinking to yourself, why do I even buy these motors if the first thing I do is modify them right away? For one, the gears inside the differential case greatly increases the torque that the motor can produce, which really helps with hill climbing, starting from a stop, and just giving some extra oomph. And having the power go through gears instead of a chain is just such a big benefit for me. Think about it, if the chain ever slipped off, I'd have to crawl under the vehicle, try to fit it back on, and that's just something I never want to have to do. And the final reason I like these differential motors is you can find axle kits that perfectly fit inside them, which makes transferring the power from the motor to the wheel just so much simpler. But something I did notice is there is a little bit of wiggle room going on between the axle and the differential, which I don't really like. There's going to be a lot of forces running through these parts, and I want to make it as snug as possible. And I should be able to fix it by finding the correct size bearings. But if you've ever looked up non-standard bearing sizes, you know that they can get pretty expensive very fast. So it's looking like it's time to get creative with some standard size bearings. And I found these ones. They have a 25mm internal bearing, which means it fits perfectly around the axle. But when it comes to the differential, there's quite a bit of space around it. So we'll need something to fill up that space. And what I landed on is this, a piece of silicone hose. And this is some nice flexible hosing. It's strong, it's got fibers to reinforce it. And normally you'd be finding this stuff inside of your car engine as it hooks up to your radiator to your engine for the coolant. And it just happens to be the perfect size and material that I'm looking for. It fits inside the differential perfectly. So then I could just cut some little pieces of it, place it around the bearing, and then just use a rubber mallet to tap it in place. And since it's a bit flexible, the hosing, it really squishes itself in there nice and secure. A way better solution to buying those crazy expensive bearings, and I'm super happy with it. The axle sits in there nice and secure. Love it. And I gave the same exact treatment to all the other motors by welding the differential gears and adding on the bearing on the opening. Now, with all the motor mods complete, it's time to attach them to the vehicle. And for that, I'm going to be using a very similar technique I used on the previous build, by using some of this heavy duty steel plate that's a 1/4 inch thick. And the first thing I need to do is mark out where I'm going to be attaching the motor, which is pretty easy because lucky enough the differential came with a gasket, so I can trace around it for a perfect pattern. Then using the steel tubing, I trace out a few places so I'll be able to easily mount it to the frame later. With the patterns marked out, it's time to clamp all these plates together and bring it on over to the drill press because it's time to start the process of drilling through an inch thick of steel, which is definitely the thickest amount of steel I've ever had to drill through. And using this annular drill bit to drill out a large hole is not too hard. You just kind of gotta go really slow, don't put too much pressure, and the thing just takes time. But it makes a pretty nice hole at the end. Then I can use just some regular drill bits to drill out the holes to mount the motors, as well as drilling out the holes so I can mount these plates to the vehicle. And just like that, we got all the holes drilled out on the steel plate, and since I stacked them, I end up making 4 perfect copies of the shapes we need. To make the plates even more useful, I decided I'm going to be attaching the swing arms directly to the plate itself, which will be pretty simple because the swing arms came with these plain steel mounts, which I could just clamp and weld down to the plate. But I was a little bit worried of the strength of them, so I decided to add a little bit more strength by getting this 1/4 inch thick angle iron, breaking it up into small pieces, and placing them on each side of the shock mounts to add even more strength. Then it's off to the welding station, which is just the floor where I begin to weld all these pieces together. And I definitely want to get better at my welding skills. One day I'd like to weld a vehicle together, but the only way you get good at something is if you just practice and try. And to be honest, after cleaning up the plate, I think the welds turned out really nice. They're really strong, they're attached to the metal, they're not the cleanest or prettiest, but I'm proud of them and I know that the mounts aren't just going to fall off. And I gave the same treatment to all the other plates. Looking good. But let's get these looking great by hitting them with some cheese. I mean, giving them a coating of some of this heavy duty yellow farb equipment paint. Get it looking nice, matching the rest of the frame, and give it some nice protection as well. And I gotta say, these plates turned out beautiful. Super proud of them. Cheesy. So let's get them installed, which is really easy as I could just plop them on top of the differential, take some bolts and thread locker, and tighten them right on down to the case. And you can see the plate's also holding the bearing in place to prevent it from ever falling out, while still having access to spin freely. Absolutely beautiful. After installing the plates and all the other motors, it's time to attach them to the vehicle, which is nice and simple. Since I built the frame out of some square punch tubing, I just have to build out a couple sections with some leftover tubing. Then I'll just be able to bolt the motors directly to the frame through those holes I drilled out earlier. And I really like how simple of a solution this is. It just fits in like a piece from a kit. For installing the rest of the axle, it's pretty simple as well. Just drop in the swing arms to those mounts I welded on and tighten them down with a few bolts. Then I can just install the axle, which fits nice and snug with through the bearing into the differential gears, and then hook it up to the bottom swing arm and the top one as well. And now we can see how the axle has up and down movement, and since this is the front one, it's also going to be able to turn side to side. So let's take advantage of that up and down movement and install ourselves a nice shock. And this is the same shock from the previous build. It's definitely a bit longer than I would like it to be, And you're probably thinking to yourself, that doesn't really look like the shock I saw in the intro of the video. And we'll get to why that is in a little bit, but for now, let's just enjoy how nice they look. And head over to the other side, where we're going to install the front left axle in just the same exact way by bolting it together, placing in the swing arms, and adding on the suspension. To link the two sides together and to add some more strength, I use a long piece of tubing and some bolts and tighten it all down. But the front axle's not going to do any good unless we can actually steer this thing. So let's go ahead and hook it back up. And to reconnect the link to the knuckle, I'm going to try a pretty simple solution by just cutting off the end of the link, then screwing on the end to the steering knuckle. Then to fill the gap and add a little drop down, I take another piece of steel rod and weld the pieces together. I just thought this would be a lot easier than trying to bend the rod. Instead, adding on these drop downs and welding them to both sides is just a simpler solution. And now that it's all hooked up, you can see when I spin the wheel, it spins the knuckles, giving us steering on our front axle again. Perfect. With the front axles built out, it's time to head to the back so we can build out the back axles as well. And it's pretty much the same process, except this time I decided to build out the axles individually on the ground because I was thinking maybe it'd be a little bit easier to install them after they're built out. And I just really like the design of these. It's like a modular system within itself. The axle is just built with the suspension and everything, and you can just position it where you want and just bolt it in place. I just love the idea of like plug and play systems, and this is a great example. Just build out this axle, place it wherever you want, and it just fits. And to me, that is just so cool. Absolutely love it. After adding on one more piece of the tubing to link the axles together and to add some more strength, we got ourselves our new motors and axles installed, and I am so thrilled they turned out looking amazing. But with bigger motors requires bigger batteries, and the good old folks at Enjoybot hooked me up with not one, not two, but 3 of their beautiful upgraded 48 volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate plus batteries. And I am so excited about this. Talk about some serious power. And if you've seen any of my previous builds, most of those were powered with the original Enjoybot battery, which was an absolute beast in itself and is still an amazing battery. So the fact that these new batteries are upgraded makes me super excited. But you're probably saying to yourself, Jason, it's just a battery. What can you upgrade about a battery? Well, let me tell you, they upgraded the BMS inside of their battery. The old 100 amp hour battery could put out 100 amps continuous, but with the new upgraded battery, it can put out 200 amps continuous. They just doubled the amps that this battery can dump. And to have access to a battery that can put out 10,000 watts is just insane. They also upgraded the internal supports for the battery cells, which I'm all for because I tend to be pretty rough on my batteries, and the fact that the original one's still performing beautifully is honestly amazing, but knowing that the new ones are even more supported makes me feel even more at ease. And I've been so impressed with their batteries. They powered everything I could throw at them, my machines, my appliances, and anything in between, and they have just performed beautifully. So if you're ever looking for batteries, definitely check out Enjoybot, as I can't recommend them enough. And now that we got these beautiful batteries, we need to figure out how to fit them in the build. And for that, I have a couple options. One of them is finding room for some batteries inside of the camper, and I definitely have space for one of the batteries because I am going to be replacing the old one with the new one, and that one just lives underneath my little counter area. But for the remaining 2 batteries, I want to keep the rest of the space inside of the camper for me to hang out in. So that leaves us with option number 2, which is to head over to the back of the camper where I'm going to build out a little extension area and build a nice battery box enclosure on top for the other 2 batteries. So let's go ahead and remove everything that made this the back of the camper, like the license plate, the backup camera, and even the lights, so we can go ahead and extend it out to make it the new back. And for extending it, it's going to be pretty simple because I just made the frame out of the square punch tubing. I can just slot in a few pieces, take some nuts and bolts, and then tighten all the pieces together. And just like that, we got a nice strong base to work with. And I could just totally strap the batteries down to the tubing like this, but I want to make it look a little bit nicer and match the rest of the cabin build. So let's go ahead and build a nice battery box out of a bunch of wood. And all of these pieces of wood, I already went ahead and sealed and stained them with the same exact stuff I used on the rest of the cabin, so it should match perfectly. And all of the holes I just drilled out perfectly line up with the holes in the square tubing, so I can drop in some bolts and tighten it down to the metal frame underneath for a nice strong wood base. Then to make the floor even nicer for the batteries, I take some of the 1-inch board, the same stuff I used on the sides of the cabin. Then I can take just a couple screws and screw them down directly into the 2x4s we installed a second ago for a really nice looking wood floor. Then for the bones of the enclosure, I'm going to be using some more pieces of 2x4 and just some long screws to hold it all together. And it's just a very simple design that's going to be nice and strong, protect the batteries, and be able to handle any bumps or anything that gets thrown its way. And I always love working with wood. It's such a versatile material. You can just make so many things with it, and you can make it as simple or as complicated as you desire. Now that we got the bones built out, it's time to attach it to the vehicle, and for that, I'm going to be using some of these metal corner brackets. And they make it super easy, as I can just drop them in the corners, take some screws and screw it into the frame and to the 2x4s underneath the floor. And I'm just a big fan of using brackets like this. Then, to anchor it down in place even more, I'm going to be taking some longer screws, screwing through the battery box wood into the frame of the camper itself. And there's no way this thing's going to fall off now. On there super secure. Before I add on all of the wood siding and close up the battery box, I thought it'd be easier to drill out this hole, and this will be used to run all of the wires so I can hook them up to the batteries. Up next, let's cover up all the sides with some of that 1-inch board. This is just to make it look a lot nicer, match the rest of the cabin, and give it some more strength and protection from all the elements, things bumping around, and I just like the idea of it. And it's really easy to just go around to all the sides and corners and screw all the pieces in place. And I gotta say, this is a nice looking enclosure. I'm loving it, it's comfy to hang out inside of, and if I like it, I'm sure the batteries will as well. But it's still missing one thing, the top. So let's get to making that. Which of course is going to be made with some more 2x4s and some of that 1-inch board as well, and a couple screws to join all the pieces together. And installing the 2x4s like this hold the pieces of 1-inch wood together, and they also act as a handle so I can easily remove the lid when I need to. But as the lid sits right now, it's not super weatherproof, so I'm going to fix that by using some of this clear silicone and squeeze it all along the center crack so I can smooth it out, and when it dries, it'll be nice and sealed from water. I also take the silicone and go around to all the other corners, crevices, and cracks I could find on the battery box to make sure it's nice and sealed up as well from any water, bugs, or anything like that. And when it dries, the battery box is nice and sealed up. But I want to give it even more weatherproof protection by using some of this rubber window sealer. This stuff's great. I've used it all over different projects in the past. It's got an adhesive on the back of it, and I'm just going to take it and place it all along the bottom of the lid, and also a piece that lines up with the back wall of the camper. So now the lid's going to be extra sealed all around the battery box top to prevent any water or bugs from crawling in. But if I want to keep the lid from just flying off, I'm going to need something to clamp it down. And for that, I found these really cool stainless steel clamps. And they're really easy to install with just a few screws by screwing on the top part to the lid and the bottom part to the battery box. And I really like the design of these clamps, as you can adjust the tension however you like by just spinning this threaded part. And after installing one of these clamps in each of the corners, you can see when I attach them down, it really squishes down the weather seal between the lid and the battery box for a nice seal, while also keeping the lid on there nice and secure. Even though the batteries have upgraded internal supports, I still want a way to attach them down to the camper frame, just so they're not flopping around. So for that, I'm going to be using some of this threaded rod. And it's a pretty simple process. I'm just going to be drilling a couple holes through the floor, through the 2x4s underneath, so I can then take the threaded rods, drop them through the holes so that it pokes out through the other side. Then I can tighten it down with a nut on each side so that the threaded rod becomes a nice solid piece of the frame. And with them stuck on there nice and secure, these are going to be the perfect place to help hold our batteries down. But before we can go ahead and drop the batteries in, I want to give them a little bit of extra luxury and cushion by installing some of this foam. And this is some gym puzzle mat. It's just like foam that's a puzzle shape, so you can easily fit the pieces together. And this is the same exact foam I used on the inside of the camper. I just had some leftover pieces, so I thought I might as well use it on the bottom of the battery box. And it's really easy to cut and modify this, as you can just use a simple blade. And I also cut in a few slits that perfectly line up with the threaded rods so I can feed it through them and push the puzzle mat all the way down to the floor to make sure the batteries have a nice soft cushioned ride. Now for holding the batteries in place, it's just going to be simple. I got a couple pieces of wood and cut out a few notches that line up with the threaded rods. And to add some extra cushion and to prevent any rubbing between the battery box and the wood, I'm going to be attaching on some of this foam adhesive strip on the bottom. And with that, we can finally get the batteries installed by bringing them over to the back and gently setting them down in the enclosure. And did I mention that these batteries have upgraded internal supports? Which is really good if you accidentally drop it a little bit. And I'm so happy I put that foam under there. Now with the batteries safely in place, I can drop in those pieces of wood over the threaded rod, place on a washer and some wing nuts to tighten them down on top of the batteries. And these will ensure that the batteries are held down firmly to the frame. They're not going to bounce around, slide around, or shift, even when hitting some rough bumps. Beautiful. But there's still one more of the batteries to install. By swapping places with the old battery and reinstall it under my little table area and tie it down to the frame with some threaded rods, pretty much like the batteries in the back. And now that we got the batteries installed, there was something that came to my attention, and it has to do with the spacing of the axles. I really like where the axle sat before I added on the back battery compartment, but right now it feels a little bit too back heavy. So I'm actually going to want to shift the back axle back about 1.5 feet. And for most normal vehicles, this would be such a big headache to move the axle back like this, but for this one, it really doesn't take too long. Just undo a few bolts, shift it back, and tighten it back down to the frame. Just another reason why I really like building with this material. It's super forgiving and open to being changed on the fly. And while finishing up installing the new axle locations, I also decided to add another piece of tubing along the front to add more strength, as well as adding on another piece on the front axle on the back to add more strength there as well. And with that, the axles are in a way better position now. I just feel like it's a lot better to support the weight of the batteries in the back. It looks nicer and it just feels right to me. But none of the axles are going to work until we wire everything up, and I got some pretty sweet stuff for that. Like for one, a whole bunch of wire. And on this project, since all the motors take so much power, I have to use some of this crazy thick wire. Definitely some of the thickest stuff I've ever used. And when dealing with so much current, safety's important, so we're going to need a whole bunch of fuses. And I got a bunch of these resettable 150 amp fuses that I'll use for each motors. And I got 2 of these very serious T-class fuses that are rated for 300 amps, and I'll put these on each axle just to make sure nothing goes horribly wrong. And with so many wires, it's important to stay organized, so I'm going to be using a whole bunch of these different color heat shrink tubings, just so I know what each wire does. Then, to help hook up and make wiring the system super easy, I'm going to be using a whole bunch of these different bus bars and terminal blocks, including these massive ones, which are going to be responsible for distributing power to the whole system. We're also going to need a few tools for this. Like for one, we got a heat gun for the shrink wrap, we got some wire crimpers, wire cutters, and wire strippers to name a few. Then, to keep all the electronics nice and safe, I got these really cool containers. They're rugged, they got nice clasps on them, and they're the perfect size for everything I need to fit in there. And with great power comes great responsibility. Greater motor controllers. And I got some pretty big controllers to get those new motors moving. And when compared to the previous motor controller, it's like 4 times as heavy and at least twice as big, and quite a bit more power, as these ones can put out 60 to 100 amps. And as a bonus, I just really like the color of these ones, nice and blueberry. And of course, to help hold all the components in place, I'm going to be using some cutting board, which makes quick, clean work of mounting components by just using some machine screws. But there's still one more thing we're going to need to wire everything up. This thing. So, let's get started by getting all of the components installed in the case. And it's a pretty simple process. I go ahead and position each of the components exactly where I want them on the cutting board. Then I can just take a marker and go around and trace out all the mounting holes for each of the pieces. Then it's off to the drill press to use a special countersunk drill bit that has this little step design in it. And the key to this drill bit is to not actually drill all the way through the board, but just drill through enough so that the thin part of the drill bit tip just pokes through on the other side. So that when I drill out all the marks, it leaves these nice little countersunk holes, which are the perfect size and fit for installing these socket head machine screws. And after going around and installing one in each of the holes, you can see we have some really nice strong mounting points on our cutting board surface. But before we go ahead and install the cutting board inside of the case, there's a couple modifications I need to make to this. Like for one, the locking system on the bottom, I don't really need it, and lucky enough you can just unscrew it and take it off. Now for how I'm actually going to mount this on the vehicle, I'm going to use a simple solution of just using a piece of 2x4. And of course, my good old friend alien tape. I love this stuff. It's just like a thick, cushiony, clear tape. I like to use it as like a gasket or like a layer between things. And I'm going to use this as a way to kind of initially stick down the wood on the bottom of the case. Then on the inside of the case, I'll put down a few more pieces of the alien tape and stick down the cutting board on top. Then it's as simple as taking a drill, drilling through the cutting board, the case, into the 2x4 underneath, and grabbing some wood screws to screw it all together to turn all the parts into one solid piece. But as the case sits right now, we still need a way to run some wires inside. So for that, I'm going to be installing these large cable glands. And these are really easy to install by just using a hole saw. And I chose this case as well because it's made out of a nice soft plastic, so I don't have to worry about the plastic shattering when drilling out these large holes. Then I can just drop the cable glands in place and tighten them down through the other side. And we got ourselves some nice channels to run wires. Now I can take all of the components and install them in place by dropping them directly on top of the machine screws, which perfectly line up with everything. Then taking a whole bunch of nuts and tightening everything down nice and secure to the cutting board base. Then to make things easier, I use my label maker to go around and mark all the components and connections just to help if there's any troubleshooting that needs to be done. So let's go ahead and hook up all these controllers. And you can tell there's just so many of these different connectors on the ends of them. And in the past, I used to just cut them off and crimp on my own connectors, but I decided to do a little bit of research and find out what these connectors are actually called, and I believe they're called Molex connectors, and by using them to make these little wires, it'll make connecting them up to the controllers even easier, as I can take the connectors for the throttle in reverse and just pop them in place for a much simpler installation. And if there's ever problems with a controller, I can pop out the bad one and drop in a new one in place without having to cut any wires. And speaking of not having to cut wires, I designed the rest of the system with a similar idea in mind, where all the components are connected with these terminal blocks and bus bars, so if any individual component breaks, I can just unscrew a few things, drop in a new component, and then we're good to go. And now, the only thing left to hook up is going to be the power coming in from the batteries. Then we gotta hook up the power going to the motors. And lastly, hook up our controls in the front cab to the throttle and reverse signals. And I gotta be honest, I am so proud with how this controller box turned out. But this one's only for the back axle, so I had to make an exact duplicate copy for the front axle as well. And they turned out absolutely beautiful. So let's get them installed. Starting with heading under the camper to remove the old box with the old motor controllers installed. And this is still a really nice controller box as it's set up for plug and play with those 1000-watt motors, so I can definitely see myself reusing this on a project in the future. But now that we got room underneath the camper, it's time to install the new controller boxes, which is super simple as the 2x4s has some holes I pre-drilled in them that perfectly line up with the holes on the square tubing, so I can just lift it up, push it through the holes in the square tubing frame, and bolt it directly to the underside for a nice and secure installation of the new controller boxes. Looking good. And there's also the clasps on the sides, which I can easily open up for quick access to all the electronics if I need to change parts, swap out something, reset fuses, and it also makes it a lot easier when wiring everything up. And the first thing I want to swap out when wiring up the system is going to be these switches with these way larger ones. And these are some pretty sweet switches. They say they have a maximum current of 600 amps, which is way more than enough for what I need. I honestly might not need to swap out the switches as the old ones have a rating of 200 amps, but that's around the maximum of what my system's going to draw, and I just feel a little bit better if there was a little more headroom. And since the system's carrying way more current, it's time to replace all of the old wire with some way more serious wire. And this stuff is sold as like welding cable or inverter cable. And when working with cable this size, it's always super important to have really secure crimped connections on there. And I always like to add on some heat shrink tubing for color coding and to add even more protection on the terminal. So let's go ahead and connect everything up by taking the super thick wire, running it all the way up to the front of the vehicle, up through the cable gland in the floor, so we can hook them up to the new switches. And I was really close to using relays instead of these switches, but by the time I bought relays and all the stuff for that, it would have ended up costing the same and had way more failure points, as the switches are just simpler and I like them a bit better. And the switches just get screwed in directly to the frame of the camper. Nice and simple. And the front switch is going to turn on the back axle for power to the system, and then the back switch is going to turn on the front axle for 4-wheel drive. Who doesn't love some nice big switches? Beautiful. And while I'm up here, it's also time to rehook up our controls for our foot throttle and our reverse switch, which all get sent through this wire right here, so I can feed it down through the cable gland underneath the vehicle and feed them into the control boxes so I can hook them up inside. And it's also time to hook up all the power wires that are going to run to the motors, which is super simple because the motors came with these really cool quick connect plates, which you can just bolt the phase wires together. And I gotta give them points because the connector box is nice and yellow. And these controller boxes turned out incredible, nice and organized, and I love how you can just clasp them on up. But there's still one more electronic part to tackle, the inverter board. So let's pop out the board and do a quick little change. By removing the fuses, because they're in the controller box, adding on the thicker bus bars, I kept the same 800 watt inverter, and I cut out a larger hole for easier cable management. And that's it. So let's go ahead and get it installed. Just drop it in place and screw it back down to the frame underneath. I also decided to reuse one of the switches from earlier, and I'm going to be installing it for the 12 volt system, just in case I ever need to turn off my 12 volt supply. I have a nice little switch to do so. Now for connecting up all the batteries to the bus bars, it's important that when I cut all the connectors, I cut them at the exact same length, and that's because I'm going to be connecting these batteries in parallel. And the same length conductors should ensure the batteries will discharge at the same rate and charge at the same rate as well, which is important for a system like this. And this is definitely the biggest battery system I've ever put together, and I'm excited to see what it can do. And before connecting all the batteries, I made sure to charge them all at 100%, just to make sure the system's nice and balanced. And with that, I can finally close up the battery box lid and lock it down in place. Beautiful. And while I'm back here, it's also time to reinstall the backup camera and the lights on the side. The back's back in action. I also thought it'd be pretty cool if I installed this next to my other external ports. And all this is, it's like an extension cord with a flush mount and a nice waterproof cap on the outside, so I can plug one end to the inverter and I'll have access to 120 volt AC on the outside of the camper. And it's super easy to install. Just use the correct size hole saw, drop in the end. Then to add some extra weather sealing, I'm going to be using some more of the clear silicone, the same stuff I used on the battery box, and place it all around it so I can squish it in place, then take some wood screws and screw it down directly to the cabin frame. And now we have a nice weather sealed access port to 120 volt AC next to our 48 volt and our 12 volt ports. Super useful. And with that, all of our electrical system upgrades are complete. So it's time to head inside the camper, close up the battery box, and test out the system to make sure everything works. Lights, camera, and action. And you can see the back axle spins and both of the motors are working beautifully. Then I can flip it in reverse and the back axle now spins in reverse. I can also flip on the front axle and now both of the axles are spinning. And I also have access to steer the front axle as well. We got power. Awesome. Now that we know this thing can move, we need to know that this thing can stop by installing some brakes. And I still have the brake lines attached to the vehicle because I still have the brake handle in there. But when it comes to the brakes themselves, the new axles I got came with some new calipers, and it's pretty cool as the brake disc gets directly attached down to the hub, which I think is a nice design. And the brake calipers that came with these axle kits, they're actually quite a bit bigger and beefier, so they should have quite a bit more stopping power, which I'm all for. And the calipers just slot in place and get bolted directly down to the axle. Then you just gotta take the brake line and connect it on up. And this time, I'm actually attaching the brake calipers to the front axle instead of the rear, because someone in the comments mentioned that the front axle brakes are responsible for most of the braking power, and after doing a bit of research, I tend to agree with them. So, the front axle it is. And speaking of comments, someone also mentioned that I should flip around my brake handle, so instead of pulling to stop, I could push and stop instead. And I really like that idea. So, I zip off the brake handle, flip it around, and screw it back down to the frame underneath. And after refilling and bleeding the brakes, we can give them a test. And we got ourselves some nice stopping brakes. Beautiful. And with that, all of our brake lines and wiring is complete, but you can still see it all kind of just hanging underneath the vehicle, and that's really no way to treat the wiring. So it's time to take some split tubing and go around to all the wires to clean it up a bit. And I really like using this stuff as it's easy to cover up all the wires, it adds a nice layer of protection, and I can easily attach it to the frame with just a couple zip ties for a quick, clean and secure cable management look. Gotta love it. And now that we got all the wiring done, it's time to get this thing rolling. But it turns out the wheels I'm reusing from the previous version, they're a little bit small and they end up rubbing against the brake calipers. So for that, instead of getting new wheels, I ended up getting these wheel spacers, which extend the wheels out enough to stop them from rubbing on the brakes. And when installing all these hubs and wheels, I make sure to use a good amount of thread locker in all the hardware, just to ensure that they don't vibrate loose when hitting rough bumps. And with that, we got our wheels installed. Delicious. Uh-oh, do you hear that? It sounds like it's the problem alarm. I mean, all projects gotta have something that goes wrong, and I think I found it. You see, it's the shocks. The way that they're positioned in there right now makes them completely bottom out under the weight of the vehicle, which is really not ideal. I mean, I could honestly just leave them as is and just say it's okay and take it out, but it'd be a really rough bumpy ride, and I want to do better than that. And if we take a closer look at what's going on with the suspension, we can see the shock's almost horizontal. It's at a very shallow angle, and it's definitely not ideal for absorbing energy, as it doesn't take much force to get this thing to bottom out. I'd much rather install the shock in this orientation, way more vertical, because this orientation is better at absorbing the energy, and it takes quite a bit more force to bottom out. And the only reason I didn't install the shocks like this to start is because I would have had to lift up the vehicle around 8 more inches, which really isn't an option. Because if I actually want to take this thing camping, I have to fit it outside the garage, which is currently 83 inches tall, and the camper itself is right around 81 inches tall, so that gives me around 2 inches of lift to play with. And with such little wiggle room, it's time to get creative. And I really tried my best to reuse these shocks from the previous build, as they've been good to me, they've been nice and strong, and I just think they were really cool. But there comes a time where you just gotta bite the bullet and get some smaller shocks. So I ended up getting these ones. They're quite a bit smaller, and they should fit in the plan. And for installing the new shocks, I came up with a super simple method by using 4 pieces of steel plate, stacking them together, and drilling out a hole in each side. And the holes are going to line up perfectly with the steel tubing frame. Then I found some plain steel shock mounts, which I can place in the center of each of the plates. Then I can clamp them together and bring it over to the welder to weld the shock mounts directly down to the plate underneath. And I'm definitely getting a good amount of welding practice done on this project. Nice and spicy. Then of course, it's off to the paint station where I paint all of the mounts yellow with that heavy duty farm equipment paint to get everything looking beautiful. And I gotta say, these shock mounts turned out looking lovely, nice and strong, the welds are good, and they're gonna be super easy to install. But before that, it's time to remove the old shock, as well as shifting down the motor plate for a 2-inch drop down. Then I can take the new shock mount and install it with a couple bolts directly to the steel tubing frame. I love the design of the shock mount, super easy and perfect when working with the square tubing frame. And then the shock fits in like a glove, and you can just tighten it down with a couple bolts. And just like that, we got our new shock installed. It's way more vertical and way better to handle the forces being applied to it. And after going around to install the shocks on the rest of the axles, I'm so happy I took the time and fixed this the way I thought it should be. The suspension's going to be so much smoother, it can actually support the weight of the vehicle without just instantly bottoming out. And plus, I ended up adding a couple inches of lift on the vehicle, so it's a win-win for me. But there's still one more little problem. Since I lifted up the vehicle, it does mean I had to extend the drop-down section on the steering link by adding on another piece of metal. I thought it would be worth at least trying this solution, but I do not like it at all. It just feels way too janky. So it's time to do what I should have done a while ago. Instead of dropping down the section between the steering link, it's time to take the actual rack and pinion and drop that down to this bar underneath by building out a little platform of tubing so I can relocate the rack and pinion to it. And dropping down the rack and pinion like this is going to line it up so much better with the steering knuckles. But since I did do a drop down, it does mean I have to take the length that goes between the rack and pinion and the steering wheel because it's not long enough to reach anymore, and we're going to need to extend it quite a bit. And for that, I'm using a simple solution of just cutting it in half with a saw, grabbing a piece of steel rod, and just welding it in the middle. And I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with myself with the welding of this because it was just freehand and I feel like it turned out really nice and on center. Super proud of this. So let's go ahead and get it back installed by dropping it in place in the rack and pinion and attaching it back to the end of the steering wheel. Fits like a glove. And now it's time to deal with those horrendous steering links and do what should have been done a long time ago and cut up those squiggles and get rid of them to turn them back to pretty much how they started on this build. Then to finalize them in place, attach one end to the knuckle, the other to the steering rack, line them up, grab the welder, and weld them into one solid piece. And I gave the same treatment to both sides of the steering links. And of course, it's not finished until I cover it with some nice yellow paint. And just like that, we have the final upgraded suspension and steering link in place, how it should have been from the start. But hey, we're here now, and we got full functionality of the steering, way better suspension, and I am so thrilled. There's only one more finishing touch to add on. The new license plate in the back. QN08. It's been a long journey to get up to this point, going through so many different versions and trying so many different things, but I am so happy with how this version turned out. And with that, let's load this thing up with gear, drive it off-road, and have ourselves a wonderful night. Let's have some fun. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and turn this thing on. Let's just try with the back axle first. Make sure we're going forward and let's have some fun. This feels so much smoother. Oh wow, look at all those birds. This feels so much smoother than the previous version. I think the suspension's working like it should. I'm thrilled. Such a nice day out here. Everything is so green. Just floating along. Alright. And I really like how I repositioned the brake. Someone mentioned it in the comments and it was just a really good idea. I think it makes more sense to kind of push to stop. It just feels more natural. Anyways, it's time to turn on the front axle and see how this thing does with four-wheel drive. I mean, it's already doing great, but it should have some more power now. Oh yeah, this thing kind of threw me back. Oh yeah. Behind us, just driving along these trails, and this thing is just handling so nice, way better than the last version. The suspension's actually working. This thing isn't creaking like crazy anymore, and it's just like a smooth ride. It feels like I'm driving like an old car. It's kind of floating along these trails. Did a nice little turnaround. I love my forward and reverse switch. Got my little rear view camera, if you can see it, but it's super handy because I can't really see anything behind me. But yeah, let's go find a fishing dock. There's one somewhere over there. Let's go find it and try to handle some fishing because it's a nice day. It looks like it's gonna rain, but it's hard to tell. This thing should be nice and sealed up. I'm kind of curious to see what it would handle in a rainstorm. So whatever it throws at us, we'll be able to handle it. But for now, I think it's time we try to do a little bit of fishing. I haven't caught a fish this year, but let's go ahead and try to change that. Oh man, this thing is so touchy. It's got quite a bit of power on it now. Definitely a little bit warm in here, sweating a little bit. Feels pretty humid. I have to crack some windows once I get to the fishing dock, that's for sure. This thing finally has the power it deserves. I can't help but smile driving this thing. There's something cool about just driving a vehicle you just like built from a bunch of parts. Probably like 1,000 bolts, a million screws, a bunch of wood, and a bunch of steel tubing. This thing is awesome. I'm excited to do some fishing. This lake tends to be a pretty good fishing spot. There it is. Got ourselves the proper dock over there. Hopefully we'll catch some fish off of that. But for now, I think it's time to power off the vehicle. And the thing did beautifully. I am so happy with how this upgrade came along. Way more power in the motors. I can definitely feel it. It doesn't feel like the motors have to like kind of slowly crawl to get moving. This thing just goes. And for the battery status right now, we're at 95%. So we only went down 5% driving this thing around, which is kind of crazy. I was expecting to be around like 10 to 20% we used. Way more power. It's working. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking taking out these vehicles because everything I make is pretty much just like a one-of. It's like a prototype, and I don't really know how the thing's going to handle till I take it out. So there's only one way to find out, and we're doing it. And I'm definitely glad that I took the extra effort and installed those new shocks instead of leaving it with the previous ones. I could have totally left it with those previous ones, but it was just kept bottoming out. And I mean, if I'm going to spend this much time, energy, and everything to make this, I'm at least going to give it my all and make it the best I can. Good power, beautiful batteries. This thing can get moving, and it just floats around like a dream. All right, the folding seat. And you can see it's a little bit of a mess back here. Everything's just kind of spewed about. But our solar system, we are charging. If you can see that over there, we're getting around 1 amp to all of the batteries. Really not much juice coming from the sun, but I'm just going to at least keep it on. At least get some power back in the battery. Anyways, I got my tiny little fishing pole. This thing has done well for me. And I got some nice little fake worms and stuff. And let's see what we can do. Alrighty, let's see if we can catch a fish. I got a good feeling. And I got my favorite stuff, just a bunch of these colorful worms. It's kind of a gray day, so maybe this guy. I also brought some dried fruit snacks. Got some dried ginger and some chili mango. Just a nice little snack. This chili mango is good. It's just like a spicy, sweet treat. Alright. Got a nice little worm on there. Let's see what we can do. I know there's a lot of good fish out here. Just a nice, calm day. Not much wind. The lake is still like a pane of glass. You can just see the reflection. Would you look at that? We got ourselves sunfish or bluegill. I can never remember how to tell them apart. Caught ourselves a nice little fish. Beautiful. Cool, I caught one. First fish of the year. This lake is always very good fishing, so the times I come here, it's always a nice, pleasant time fishing. All right, look at this. I think this is a new record for the smallest bass I have ever caught. Tiny little bass. Beautiful. All right. Off he goes. Cool. Got two. All right, you ready? This is it. This is gonna be a massive fish I'm gonna catch right now. Right here on this cast. Oh, it's massive. Da, 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 da. Another one. It worked though. I did catch one. He released himself. Keep seeing something breaching the water over there. Something pretty massive. I can't cast that far though, but it'd be cool if I caught it. Sounds like the breeze is starting to pick up. I was just checking the weather and it does look like we're gonna be getting some rain tonight. So I'm probably gonna do a couple more casts, then head back to the camper and probably drive around the lake and look for a nice spot to at least camp, make dinner, and I'll probably do some more driving at night. And you can also see the wind is blowing off all these little cotton flakes and things like that. You can see this tree right over here. It's just got a whole bunch of them and it's just covering this whole lake with just like little pieces of snow. It's kind of cool, almost like it's snowing in summer. Oh yeah, I think I got one more fish. Whoa. No. Almost caught one more. That was a lot of fun. It's always a good day if you catch something. But yeah, let's find ourselves a nice spot to camp at. You see how touchy it is? It's so touchy. Just kind of lurches. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this thing's got way more power. Oh, look at this. We got ourselves a little fly guy. I don't know if you can see him. It's pretty big. I don't know what he's called, so I'm going to call him Peter. Hang on, Peter. We're going for a ride. Can I fit between these trees? I certainly hope so. Oh, it's scary. Alright, let's go find a spot to camp at. Of rain all over the windows. Just had like the slightest little dusting of rain, little drops all over the windows, and maybe it stopped, I can't even tell. But for now, I feel like this is a nice spot. It's nice and flat. The vehicle feels nice and level. And I kind of want to set up camp, make some dinner, and clean up this back area because everything's just kind of thrown back there for now. But yeah, this thing handles beautifully. Love it. All my little levers and knobs and lights and cameras and stuff. This thing is just so much fun. Welcome to the home for the night. It's a little bit dark out. Might as well pop on some lights in here. And I don't know if you can hear it, but there's the slightest pitter-patter of rain again. And our solar system is charging, but barely. I don't know if you can see it on camera. We're charging at 0.8 amps, and you divide that by 3 because we have 3 batteries. So each battery's getting like not much at all. But yeah, speaking of the battery, I went ahead and checked that, and right now we're at 93%. So we used 7%, and I drove quite a bit. These Enjoybot batteries are no joke. 93%. I feel like they barely even dropped a sweat getting this thing moving. And this thing is heavy. This thing is so heavy, but these motors and batteries got it moving beautifully. This is like the biggest battery bank I've ever messed with or built with or anything like that. It's 15,000 watt hours of power, which is crazy. You can put out 15,000 watts for an hour, which is a lot of power. You can like run a house off of these batteries. I think electric cars maybe start around like 50,000 kilowatt hours to like 150,000 kilowatt hours, and I'm at 15, so I'm not necessarily in electric car territory, but I'm getting close to that. Maybe in a couple of years or something we'll have a battery bank the size of that. But yeah, I am super happy with these batteries, the motors, and how this vehicle performed. Absolutely beautiful. I am hungry, and I got something pretty delicious planned for dinner and something I'm excited about. I'm making some shrimp tacos, that's right. Got some frozen shrimps, got some nice corn tortillas, got some cheese, got a bunch of chopped up carrots and broccoli. It looked interesting. I thought it'd be good on the tacos. Got an avocado, got a jalapeno, got some spice, and then some more spice for the shrimp. And I'm just gonna put it all in this little shrimp bag and kind of shake it all around. Gonna be some nice flavor on these shrimps for sure. And for cooking up these shrimps, I got my little stove. It's a nice little stove and a little pan to cook it in. They are cooked already. I'm just gonna warm them up and kind of cook in all that spice. Never had tacos on one of these adventures. This is gonna be pretty good. Bubble, bubble. Probably gonna warm up here in a bit too. It says it's 68 outside, 75 in here. Probably gonna be like 90 when I'm done cooking these. Starting to smell good in here. Some nice spices all around. Lovely. While the shrimps are cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and begin to chop up an avocado. I always like to cut avocados in kind of like a grid pattern. And you can kind of just unfold them and the little bits fall out. And our shrimps are doing good, absorbing all that sauce and spices. Definitely getting a little bit steamy in here. The spice is nice. Let's give this piece a little taste. Got some decent spice to that one. Alright, let these cool off for a minute. Taco. Some of this, some of those, some of this stuff, a little bit of cheese, and then a couple of shrimps. And a dash of some sauce. Delicious tacos inside the mobile cabin. Cheers. Oh yeah, I only brought one plate. I should have brought another, so I'm eating off of my cutting board. This is like fancy eating tonight. And to wash it down, I got myself a lovely Michigan Cherry Town Club soda. So sweet, but so good. One of my favorite parts of these projects is after doing the upgrade and building and spending all these hours putting it together is just hanging out and enjoying a delicious meal inside the camper. And it's nice. I like the sound of the rain outside. It's just very calming. It's a calming noise. Oh, oh. I completely forgot, but I brought some cilantro. Some nice little flavor on top. Well, I'm like almost done with my tacos, but I might as well use it on these remaining two. Now this is a proper taco. I cook very similar to my build style, as in I just try things and figure out what works. And these tacos turned out well. I couldn't tell you exactly what the spice I put on the shrimp, but it's very nice. Got one more taco left. I'm feeling really good about the state of this camper, this vehicle. I really like all the upgrades and all the things that got me to this point right here. I'm happy with the batteries. I'm happy with the motors. I'm happy with the structure of this thing, the wheels on this thing, the inverter, the solar, the cab, the windows. I'm so happy with this vehicle. I think it's fantastic, and it took me so many different iterations and trying different things to get to this point, and I'm really happy with it. I'm proud of myself for building this, and yeah, this is a pretty cool machine, and it's just nice to actually get to enjoy it and have fun with it. I feel like I've redone the wiring on this vehicle like 4 times. I don't even know how many times. I think maybe 4 times. Yeah, I think I've redone the wiring on this vehicle 4 times. Oh, that's crazy. I'm crazy. Yeah. I don't know. I am stuffed. Just cleaned up all the taco station stuff, and currently right now it says it is 61 degrees Fahrenheit outside, 75 inside. Feels good, got a nice breeze, and the slightest little bit of rain. It almost just feels like nothing, but little bits of rain coming. You can kind of see it on the dome window. You can also see it along the roof. The water just stuck to it. Oh yeah, I forgot. I installed a light here. So many revisions, I forget everything I've done. I think it's about time I take a little step outside, stretch the legs, get moving a little bit. This thing is looking so nice. Every time I make a new build or upgrade something, I feel like I get better at fabricating and building things, and I'm getting better at my welding again. I definitely want to do more welding, and I'm happy with how all my welds turned out. And the electronics boxes, nice on there, nice and secure. Oh yeah, I got this thing. I forgot. Is this thing still on? Yeah. I don't know if it's good that water's on it. There's still that little light inside, so I guess it's still working. And my little thermometer thing. I think I should have, I didn't think I had any left over, but I should take the same material that I used on the roof and place it on here. I did add some nice waterproof protection to this wood, but I'll just feel better about it if I had that on top of here. And I did obviously use the silicone to plug up all the seams, and I have the window sealer all around the edges and all around the rim of it. So this thing is nice and sealed, even though the batteries really don't need it. They have like a really high IP rating, so they can literally just be sitting out in the rain and I don't have to worry. I just built it because it looks nicer and it has a nice place to hold the batteries down in place. I don't have to worry about the batteries like jumping around or falling off of the vehicle. Just have a nice little storage area, and if I wanted to, I could like bring some like little chairs or something like that, little like storage containers, and kind of strap it down to the back of here and have a nice little place to hold some gear. And when I was building this battery box, this window right here, if you just look at it straight on, you just think it's a flat window, but it is not. It is curved, and I hit my head on this so many times trying to like reach over and grab something in here. Oh man, I hit my head on that so many times. And of course, got the flag from our previous camper, and the solar panels looking good. I don't know if you can see it, but there's 2 planes flying really close to each other, almost like aerobatic or something, or maybe one of them's pulling a glider plane. I know there's an airport around here, but that's interesting. Got the new plate. Finally went ahead and added on an independent suspension for this whole thing. Very cool. Maybe that's why it's a lot smoother of a ride. Everything is kind of on its own suspension. You got the big old motors. So awesome. These ones are so much bigger than the previous ones. Absolutely love it. And of course I got all my other ports with their nice little enclosures, 12 volts, 48 volts, and 120 volts if I turn on my inverter. So cool. I love the utility of this thing. I did end up finding a tick inside of the camper earlier. I went ahead and removed it from the premises, but yeah, they are out here. Alright, let's head on back inside. Getting a little bit wet out here, and I gotta make sure I check for ticks. Even though it was raining outside, it was still nice to just get out there and walk around for a bit. It's not raining too hard, but it's just like a steady little kind of misting of rain. Yeah, and another thing I noticed is there really wasn't any mosquitoes out there. I don't know if that means the thermocel's working or there's just not a lot of bugs today. I don't know. Maybe I'll never know, but I'm just going to keep that thing on all night long. I mean, hey, it won't hurt. Surprisingly, even with the rain, our solar charge controller is still working just a little bit, getting 0.04 amps. Really not much juice at all. In fact, the batteries don't even really register that they're getting any current in right now. But we're still at 93% on the system. But I'm sure that's giving like a little trickle. It's probably helping charge up my camera batteries down here. That's about it. As it's starting to cool down outside a bit and it's still trickling some rain, I think it'd be really nice and refreshing to have a warm cup of some peach tea. And to help boil some water, I got this little electric kettle. I like this thing. It's collapsible, doesn't take up too much power or too much space, and it's perfect for a nice little cup of tea. Alright, let's go ahead and power on the inverter. Plug in our little watt meter, 120 volts. Plug in our little kettle, and let's fill it up with some water. And we're pulling right around 592 watts, around 600 watts. And soon, we'll have some nice hot water. Even though I upgraded pretty much all the electronics in this vehicle, one thing I didn't upgrade is the inverter. I still have the 800 watt inverter, and with this battery system I could have like a way bigger inverter, but I decided to just keep that one for now because most of my appliances don't pull that much power. But in the future I can always swap it in with a larger inverter, or maybe like an inverter charger combo, add on some bigger solar panels or something. But for now, the 800 watt inverter is perfect for me. Oh, furiously boiling. Cheers. Nothing like having a hot cup of tea on a little bit of a rainy day, the sound of birds all around. And the sun isn't so crazy right now, so it's not cooking this place up like a greenhouse. I did bring a tarp in case it did get like really sunny like that has like a reflective surface on one side. And I would have placed it over like the front cab on the outside if it got like too sunny and was becoming like a greenhouse in here to reflect some of the sun away. But I really don't need that. It's just like kind of like a gray overcast day. It's definitely starting to rain again, a little bit harder, but it's really not bad. All dry inside here. Nothing's leaking, even though it's not raining like crazy, but everything's still nice and dry in here. Every time I take out one of these vehicles on like its maiden voyage, I'm always a little bit worried because I do my best to build these things to my best abilities, where I think they're going to be strong, reliable, and work well, but I never really know how they're going to function until actually take it out, actually touches the grass and drives in the dirt and hits the bumps and hits the water and gets wet and dirty. I never really know how this stuff's going to function. But every time I do take one of these vehicles out here, I learn so much. Like I learn the things that don't work, I learn the things that break, I learn the things that need to be improved on, and I also learn the things that I like, that are good, that make sense. And I'm just excited to see where it goes, because if you asked me like 2 years ago where I think I would be, the last thing I would have said was inside of like a handmade vehicle, hanging out in camp and eating shrimp tacos. I would have never guessed that. Yeah, it's just cool to see something come to life and you can just sit inside of it, drive around and enjoy it. And it's cool that it's just a part of the world now. I like it. Yeah. It's definitely raining a bit more now, a little bit heavier than it has been. Kind of want to just head over to this front section and lay down. The rain is starting to build up here. Alright, let's go ahead and No leaks in here though. Bone dry. The little steering wheel. Got this brake here. I believe this brake is for like drifting. People install them in cars to drift, facing obviously you pull it to drift or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I thought this was just a really cool brake. My own car doesn't even have this. I guess this is kind of my car. I don't know what this is. The car I normally drive doesn't even have a reverse camera. And this thing does. This thing is just fancy. Got so many systems in here. I love it. And there's absolutely no rain leaking in from the seams where I joined the front cab with the rest of the vehicle. I put so much silicone on both sides and that weather sealing. This thing is sealed up for life. Yeah, this is beautiful. I do love the feel of this. The wood in here makes it feel so much cozier. Even though the wood is like crazy heavy and like thick and strong, but I like it. This thing is built like a tank, nice and strong, and it's very cozy in here. It's like literally a little cabin on wheels. Look at that. You can't see anything. It's finally dark outside. Let's head over and prepare ourselves for a nice little night drive. Alright, let's go ahead and power on our vehicle. Flip on our lights. And I'm probably going to want to turn off all the lights in here so I can see a little bit better outside. And I don't really have wipers or anything, but I think it'll be alright. When I turned off all the lights on the inside, I can end up seeing out the window very nicely, even though there's rain all over it. And I did notice some glow bugs out there, so might be seeing some like glow bugs throughout the night, which is pretty cool. Anyways, let's drive around and have some fun. It's like a different world driving around at night. Oh yeah. Yeah, every once in a while I see some fireflies glowing a bit. It is a wet, rainy night. Just rain, rain, rain. Alright, this is a nice flat spot. Let's go ahead and set up our camp for the rest of the night. And it honestly, it's raining out there quite a bit. Yep, rain, rain, rain. But nice and dry in here. That was a lot of fun. I always love driving my machines, and driving at night just adds a whole nother layer to it. Everything outside is absolutely soaked and drenched. My poor boots got absolutely destroyed. They're just soaked to the bone from setting up the camera and stuff like that. And I'm finally getting to test out the front cab to see if it's watertight, and I can say yes, nice and watertight. And for driving this machine, it looks like I only used 2%. That's crazy. I feel like I drove a lot. These motors are suspiciously efficient. Or maybe the motors previously were suspiciously inefficient. I don't know, but I'm happy with it. We got over 90% to end the night in this massive 48 volt 300 amp hour Enjoybot battery bank. This thing is performing beautifully. Yeah, I can't believe we haven't used like 30%. I would have expected to be at like 70% or something like that right now, but not even close. I'm not complaining. It's just strange to me. And speaking of having so much battery, I'm going to go ahead and pop on the inverter because I brought my little toaster oven and we're going to make some nice cookies. And these are some s'more cookies. Never had s'more cookies. They sound interesting, and yeah, let's make some cookies. What in the world? Look at these. These are like they're like logs or something. These are the weirdest cookies I've ever seen. And hopefully there's no jalapeno juice left on my cutting board. Otherwise, they're gonna be some spicy cookies. Alright. And we're pulling right around 540 watts right now. So right around 550, I think that's what it's rated for. Temperature, looks like we're at 58 outside, 64 inside. It's a nice, cool summer night. Got the rain all around us, baking some cookies in the little toaster oven. I do look a little toasty. Gotta let these things cool down. I do have my little 12-volt fan here. Might as well cool down with that. Smells good though. It honestly smells like a s'more. Let's see if we can get these off of here. Yep, I pretty much just made one big cookie. Oh, I'm making a mess. Haha! They look a little burnt. Fresh baked s'more cookie. That's good. Definitely going to be making a couple more of those. I think I'm just going to try to make one massive one. Oh my, I think this is the last cookie. This is just like a monster. This is not really a good spatula. Oh no. Yep, there's no way this is coming out in one piece. A little bit broken, but doesn't take away from the flavor. Just a nice little sweet treat at the end of the night. I hear a little bit more rain outside. It's getting late, but there's still one more thing I want to do, and that is play some games. Got a nice little setup right here. Got this tiny little keyboard. I just got this thing. I got it because it's so small, and I thought it was really unique. It just kind of folds in half. So if I'm ever like really low on space, I can just fold it in half and just use this for WASD. Got my little mouse here, running off the Steam Deck, powered by the inverter, and also my little 12-volt supply. But yeah, I thought it'd be nice and cozy to play some games with some rain going on outside, hanging out in the little camper. And I'm thinking I want to play Stanley Parable. Just a fun game, casual, nothing too crazy.
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Should I? Nope.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
I just love the idea of a game where there's like a narrator narrating your life, and you can either choose to do it or not do it, and just the comedy that ensues from it.
Stanley walked through the red door. Perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door. I still don't think we're communicating properly.
Nope.
Stanley walked. All right, fine. Go ahead, Stanley.
I don't know. Should I go to my control facility or should I go to the escape? I'm thinking escape.
Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power. Stanley stepped through the open door. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Such a fun game. It's so unique. There's not many games like it. I definitely recommend checking it out if you never played it. But it is midnight. It is actually 12:12 in the morning. I am exhausted and tired and ready to set up my sleeping bag and get some sleep. All right. And I remembered a nice pillow. It has been a long day, a beautiful day, and it's late, and I'm ready to get some sleep. But before that, I want to check on the battery status, and our beautiful 48-volt, 300 amp hour battery is at 90%. That's crazy. We only use 10% of the total battery capacity. I honestly expected to use at least 30% by now, but no, it's just performing beautifully, and these motors I feel like are more efficient than the previous ones. I don't know, but I also did just increase the battery by like 3 times, so yeah, maybe my calculations are just off a bit. Anyways, I am exhausted, I am tired, and I'm ready to get some sleep. So, get some good sleep, everybody, and I'll catch you all in the morning. Good night.
Good morning. I hear birds. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's no longer raining. And I slept pretty well. I think it's time to make some breakfast. I already went ahead and kind of cleaned up some stuff and prepared my little kitchen area because I want to make a nice little cup of tea first thing in the morning, some lemon tea. And right now it is 57 outside, 61 inside. Not too hot, not too cold, just a cooler morning. And I can also see that on my solar panels, I turned them on. We're almost charging at an amp right now, and the sun, I believe, is starting to poke out a little bit, even though it's pretty low over there. But once it rises, we'll get some more juice on the system. And I also parked pretty close to the dock. The dock is that way a bit, because I wanted to try to do some fishing this morning after breakfast. Maybe we'll get lucky again. I feel like it ended up raining quite a lot yesterday. I feel like it rained almost all night long. But everything is nice and dry in here. Camper is totally sealed off, so really nothing to worry about that. Bubble, bubble. Cheers. Now that I got a cup of tea, it's time to make some breakfast. And for that, I brought my little waffle maker. Let's make some mini waffles. This is like the smallest waffle maker in the world. Plug it in, get this thing warming up. Yep, there we go. I always like making pancakes and waffles in a jar. It's just easier to shake everything up. I don't need a whisk or anything, and then only have like one thing to clean after. This is such a small little waffle maker. Yeah, I forget how much steam and moisture this maker's gonna release. It might fog up all the windows in here. I really like this like mattress thing I sleep on, but every time I use it I feel like it rips. It rips a little bit more. This is like the comfiest one I've had just because it's literally a chunk of foam, but the poor thing is ripping. Yeah. And I got a little tiny maple syrup, some real stuff, the real deal. Nice. Oh, a perfect one. Oh, success. Nice. Uh-oh. Is that too much? Oh no. It does look like it's overflowing. I always like making waffles. It's fun. It's just like a fun machine that just pumps out delicious breakfast. This one's beautiful. It's getting all foggy in here. Oof. These ones turned out so nice. I think this is the best I've used this little waffle maker. They're all like full-sized, full mini-sized. Cheers. Oh. Very good. Some nice tea, some delicious waffles, and some real maple syrup. I'm excited to try some fishing after this. It seems like a really nice day out. It's no longer raining. The sun's poking out every once in a while, and yeah, it just seems like a really nice day. Hopefully the fish want to come out to play. It's kind of cool that maple syrup just comes from trees. The stuff's tasty. The last bite. Just cleaned up the breakfast area. It's a really nice day outside. I think we try our hand at a little bit more fishing this morning. I'm kind of curious before we go fishing. I kind of want to open this, see if it's wet in here. Ugh. No way it's wet in here. This is like nice and sealed. You could hear it lifting off. Cool. Yeah, batteries look beautiful. Everything's wonderful. Nice and dry. Beautiful. I'm happy with that. Cool little clasps as well. The camper. It's a beautiful day. The lake looks like glass again. I saw a massive turtle over there a couple minutes ago. I saw a few bass. I think we're gonna do pretty well. Oh, look at this. Got ourselves a nice little fish. Let's go ahead and release him back into the wild. Caught a little one. Number 2 this morning. Back into you go. I've been out here fishing for a little while now, and I really haven't gotten much since the last fish. I feel like the fish are kind of done with me. That's alright. I think I'm about to call it soon anyway. Yeah, at least we caught 2 fish. Once again, this has been a lot of fun. Caught some fish, made some delicious food, tested out the new system with the big old motors and the beautiful battery system. Everything worked beautifully, and I survived some rain in here. Everything is bone dry in here except my boots. They got pretty soaked yesterday. They're still a little bit wet. But sadly, it's time for me to pack up all my gear, jump inside the driver's seat, and head on back home. It's been a wonderful adventure, and I hope you've enjoyed coming along the ride with me. Gear's all packed up, and now it's time to start the journey back home. I really like this little cockpit area. I like all the switches and everything. So cool. Anyways, this has been a wonderful adventure. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I truly appreciate you for taking the time to watch my videos, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Let's head on out of here.